Welcome to part 3 of an ongoing series on the life and battles of Quintus Sertorius, rebel general and ruler of Hispania during the late Republic. Last time we left our hero, Quintus had almost certainly fought in both of Gaius Marius's major battles in 102 and 101 BC, even acting as a spy within the barbarian ranks during the Cimbrian War. As noted previously, to understand the rise and life of Sertorius, we necessarily must set the context of that life. Gaius Marius was an essential figure, Sertorius hitching his wagon to the wider Marian or Populares cause. Having very likely been present at Aquae Sextii and Vercellae, Sertorius may have considered his own star on the rise during the year of 100 BC. His general Marius was elected consul for a remarkable 6th term and enjoyed a second triumph, arguably the greatest honour given to a Roman leader. However, Marius's 6th consulship would quickly turn sour, Rome's so-called saviour allying with the controversial and brutal tribune of the plebs, Saturninus. Never a natural favourite of the senatorial class, Marius backed the tribune who had forced the exile of his old general and rival, Metellus Numidicus. Saturninus also pushed through a law assigning colonial lands to the Italian veterans of Marius's army, which served to alienate his ally Marius from many of the Roman plebeians. Furthermore, Saturninus was not gentle in his conduct, having an opponent brutally beaten to death, using violence and intimidation to even attempt to influence the outcome of the year's consular elections in favour of his other ally, Glaucia. However, Saturninus's aristocratic detractors were, unfortunately for him, also happy to use violence, the Senate eventually issuing a Senatus Consultum Ultimum, an order that Marius as consul was forced to abide by, that Saturninus and his mob were to be crushed. Saturninus was indeed killed while holing up in the Senate House with the possible complicity of his erstwhile ally. Having angered both the Senate and even many plebs by his conduct, Marius had done a near complete about-face by leaving office in disgrace. A year later, the agrarian laws were repudiated by the Senate and the great general fell into semi-retirement. Having ridden the wave of Marius's rise during the Cimbrian War, Sertorius, as an associate, now likely elected to get out of town, much like his general had done. He was posted as a military tribune to Hispania, the future crucible of his later career. He served under the proconsul Titus Didius, who himself served as governor there from 97 to 93 BC. Specifically, he was stationed at Castulo, a town regularly garrisoned by Rome since the Second Punic War. Castulo, located in modern-day Andalusia, southern Spain, was a wealthy area because of its lead and silver mining operations, yet such wealth and culture of opulence to match apparently rubbed off on the garrison occupying the place. Plutarch writes that, quote, "In the midst of such abundance, the men had abandoned all pretense of discipline and spent most of their time getting drunk." Indeed, it could very well have been the sorry state of the garrison that caused Sertorius to be assigned to the town in the first place, his old commander Marius having been known as a disciplinarian and Sertorius known as a good officer. Unfortunately, it appears that Sertorius was not the only one aware of the garrison's state of battle readiness, or rather lack of it. As well as their drunkenness, the soldiers present likely damaged the urban property and harassed Castulo's womenfolk, causing the men of the area to scheme rebellion. Sertorius, it appears, was simply too late to instill any order to a rapidly deteriorating situation. Having decided they could not destroy the Romans by themselves, the local men allied with the men of a neighbouring settlement, the Oritanians, to attack Sertorius's men. As they hunkered down for yet another night of drunken debauchery, many Romans were starkly met with the sharp blades of some angry Spaniards. While it's almost certain the men of the garrison were not actually dispersed in the houses of the town, Many must have been caught off guard by the ferocity of the attack. However, since common practice was for men to house in barracks on the edge of their town, the better to control the inhabitants and also to defend against external threats, most of the Roman force escaped the cut of Spaniard swords, being effectively driven from the town instead. The attack had been partially successful from the rebels' perspective, but not decisive, as not only did most of Sertorius' men escape, but did so with their arms. Re-establishing order outside of Castulo's walls, Sertorius coldly ordered that each exit be sealed off, and then systematically slaughtered every male of fighting age, without any investigation as to their individual part, if any, in the uprising. Sertorius thus demonstrated his ruthless side to offset his later political acumen when it came to the Spanish tribes, and it was a lesson that was long after remembered. Yet at this point, the military tribune was not finished. Having realised he had more dead barbarians than he should have had, he discerned that the rebellion was wider spread than simply in Castulo. Just as he had illustrated his ruthlessness, now Sertorius would show his characteristic guile. Ordering his men to put on the garments and armour of their fallen enemies, he marched them to the nearby settlement that had aided the rising in Castulo. The inhabitants eagerly flung open their own gates upon spying what appeared to be their own returning warriors, likely with liberal amounts of booty, though their glee quickly fell into outright terror as Sertorius' men repeated their slaughter, the survivors themselves becoming spoils for the victorious Romans. So it was that Quintus Sertorius made his mark early on in the region where his name would be bloodily written in the pages of history. The young commander had effectively secured 2 Spanish towns in a single night. Needless to say, his name would echo throughout Hispania and back in Rome itself for his bold and decisive exploits that night, and enough to boost his own ascent onto the first rung of Rome's political ladder. But that is a story for another time.